Nia Jackson stands soaked in the Atlanta rain outside Fulton County Courthouse, watching detectives Victor Hayes and Randall Cole shove a handcuffed black teen into their squad car, laughing about keeping him down. It seems routine until Nia spots Hayes slyly plant a drug baggie in the boy's pocket. Her breath catches, rage igniting as she grasps the setup's depth. This fleeting moment will unravel her world, thrusting her into a brutal fight against corruption. What happens when the hunted becomes the hunter? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe, because tomorrow's explosive episode is one you won't want to miss. Nia Jackson steps into the Fulton County Courthouse, her sneakers squeaking on the slick marble floor as she shakes off the rain clinging to her faded navy blazer. She adjusts the straps of her worn backpack, her slender frame blending into the bustle of Atlanta's legal heart. Her braids are pulled tight, her wide brown eyes scanning the crowd with a quiet intensity that belies her unassuming look. She's here posing as a paralegal intern, a nobody in the eyes of the suits rushing past with their polished briefcases and crisp ties. The air hums with the murmur of anxious defendants, the clipped tones of attorneys barking into phones, and the occasional clang of a metal detector. Nia keeps her head low, her posture soft, but her mind is a steel trap, ready to snag every detail she can use against the men she saw outside. She clutches a crumpled notepad, her fingers trembling not from fear but from the fire simmering beneath her skin. She's seen the game now, and she's here to play it better than they ever will. The courtroom she enters, 3C, is a tight box of faded wood paneling and flickering fluorescent lights. Nothing grand, but steeped in the weight of countless verdicts. She slips into a seat near the back, the hard bench creaking under her slight weight. Up front, detectives Victor Hayes and Randall Cole stand tall in their starched uniforms, their broad shoulders squared like they own the place. Hayes, thick-necked, with a buzz cut that makes his head look like a bullet, adjusts his badge with a smug flick. Cole, leaner with a scar snaking down his jaw, leans against the witness stand, his pale blue eyes glinting with a cold amusement. They're here to testify against Jamal Carter, the teenager Nia saw them cuff outside. Jamal sits at the defense table, his skinny frame dwarfed by the oversized orange jumpsuit, his hands fidgeting as he stares at the floor. His public defender, a harried woman with graying curls and a stack of files spilling from her arms, shuffles papers like she's already half defeated. The judge, a wiry man with a pinched face and glasses perched low on his nose, bangs his gavel, once the sound sharp enough to slice through the room's low buzz. Nia pulls out her notepad, her pen hovering as Hayes takes the stand first. His voice booms, thick with a Georgia drawl, as he spins a tale about spotting Jamal in a known drug zone near Peachtree Street, claiming the kid bolted when they approached, a baggie of cocaine tumbling from his pocket in plain sight. Cole nods along, his lips twitching into a smirk as he waits his turn. Nia's stomach twists at the lie, her memory flashing to that sly hand slipping the drugs into Jamal's jeans. She scribbles fast, noting every inflection, every gesture, her handwriting a furious scrawl. The prosecutor, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, nods approvingly, his questions lobbed soft and leading, like he's tossing candy to a favored pet. Jamal's lawyer stands, her voice shaky as she tries to poke holes in the story. She asks why there's no body cam footage, why the arrest report lists no witnesses in a busy neighborhood. Hayes shrugs, his meaty shoulders rolling like it's all a joke. Camera was down that day, ma'am, happens sometimes. And folks round there don't talk to cops, Cole chimes in, his tone dry as dust. Kid was high as a kite, resisting. We had to take him down fast. Nia's pen digs into the paper, nearly tearing it. She knows Jamal's cries of innocence are true, but the judge leans back, his expression bored like he's heard this song 1,000 times before. He cuts off the defense's questions with a wave, muttering about lack of evidence to contradict sworn testimony. Jamal's head drops lower, his shoulders slumping as the weight of the system presses down. Then Hayes spots her. His eyes, dark and beady, lock onto Nia in the back row. He leans over to Cole, whispering something that makes the thinner cop glance her way too. Hayes steps off the stand, swaggering toward the prosecution table, but his gaze stays fixed on her. "Who's the little shadow back there?" he says, loud enough for half the room to hear. A few heads turn and Nia feels heat crawl up her neck. She ducks her head, pretending to adjust her blazer, but her ears catch Cole's reply. Probably some intern. Should stick to fetching coffee instead of playing lawyer. The courtroom ripples with a few chuckles, the prosecutor smirking. Like it's a private club she'll never join. Nia's jaw tightens, but she keeps her face blank, her pen moving like she's just doodling. Inside, her blood boils, a vow forming sharp and clear. She'll bury these men with their own words. The session drags on, Cole taking the stand to parrot Hayes' story with a few extra flourishes, painting Jamal as a repeat offender, despite his clean record. Nia notes it all, her eyes flicking between the cops, the judge, and the jury, a mix of tired faces who barely seem awake. She catches the way Hayes adjusts his tie, a nervous tick when the defense mentions the missing footage, and how Cole's scar twitches when he lies about Jamal's aggression. Every detail is a thread she'll weave into a noose. The judge finally calls a recess, and the room empties in a slow shuffle, attorneys muttering about lunch plans Jamal led back to holding with his head still bowed. Nia stays put, her heart pounding a fierce rhythm against her ribs. She's invisible to them, a ghost in plain sight, and that's exactly where she wants to be. As Hayes and Cole stride past her row, their boots thudding on the worn carpet, Hayes pauses. He towers over her, his shadow swallowing the light from the overhead bulbs. "You're here a lot, huh, girl?" His voice is a low growl, dripping with mockery. "What's your deal? Studying to be a big-shot lawyer or just lost?" Nia forces her lips into a timid smile, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just learning, sir. I like watching cases." Cole snorts, his scar stretching as he grins. "Better find a new hobby. This ain't no place for you." They laugh, a harsh grating sound that echoes off the walls, and Nia lets her shoulders slump, playing the part of the scared kid they think she is. They turn away, satisfied with their little power trip, their voices fading as they head for the exit. Nia exhales, her fingers curling around her notepad. She flips it open, scanning the pages she's filled with their lies, their tics, their smug certainty that no one's watching close enough to catch them. She knows the baggie wasn't Jamal's, knows they've done this before, knows they think they're untouchable. Her pulse steadies as she tucks the notepad into her backpack, her mind racing through what she's gathered so far. It's not enough yet, not nearly enough to topple them, but it's a start. She stands smoothing her blazer and slips out into the hallway, her steps light despite the weight pressing on her chest. She's safe in her disguise for now, a nobody they've already dismissed. That's their first mistake, and she'll make sure it's not their last. Outside the courtroom, the air is thick with the smell of stale coffee and damp coats, the rain still drumming against the tall windows. Nia weaves through the crowd, her eyes darting to every corner, every face. She spots Hayes and Cole near the vending machines, their heads bent close, muttering something she can't hear. She lingers by a bulletin board, pretending to read a faded flyer about legal aid, her ears straining. Their laughter cuts through. The noise again, sharp and mean, and she catches Hayes' voice saying, "That kid's done, no one's digging him out of this." Cole nods, popping a stick of gum into his mouth. "Not with us on it. System's ours." Nia's stomach churns, but she keeps her face blank, her fingers itching to write it down. She's got them pegged now, their arrogance laid bare, and she'll use it to tear them apart. She slips away before they notice her again, her mind already spinning through her next move. She needs more than words, more than notes. She needs proof that sticks, proof they can't dodge. Her heart thumps with a mix of fear and fury as she steps back into the rain, the courthouse looming behind her like a fortress she's determined to crack. She's still unseen, still underestimated, and that's her edge. But as she walks away, a prickle runs up her spine, a whisper of instinct telling her they're not as blind as she hopes. She pushes it down, focusing on the vow she made in that courtroom. She'll expose them no matter what it takes, and they'll never see her coming. Nia Jackson steps out of the Fulton County Courthouse into the humid Atlanta dusk, the rain reduced to a fine mist that clings to her braids and dampens her faded blazer. Her sneakers splash through shallow puddles as she adjusts her backpack, her mind still buzzing with the courtroom scene she left behind. Detectives Victor Hayes and Randall Cole's smug faces linger in her thoughts, their lies about Jamal Carter echoing like a taunt she can't shake. She's got their words on paper, their arrogance captured in ink, but it's not enough. She needs more, something concrete to turn their game against them. The streetlights flicker on, casting long shadows across Peachtree Street, and she decides to follow a hunch. She saw the cops head toward a diner a block away after the recess, their laughter trailing behind them like a dare. If they're as careless as they seem, she might catch them slipping. The diner's neon sign buzzes faintly, its red glow spilling onto the wet pavement as Nia approaches. Through the fogged-up windows, she spots Hayes and Cole sprawled in a corner booth, their uniforms unbuttoned at the collar, mugs of coffee steaming in front of them. She slips inside, the bell above the door jingling softly, and takes a seat at the counter, far enough to stay unnoticed, but close enough to hear. The place smells of grease and burnt toast, the clatter of plates mingling with the hum of a jukebox playing some old country tune. Nia orders a soda, her fingers drumming on the sticky countertop as she angles her head to listen. Hayes's voice cuts through the noise first, low and rough. "Kid like Jamal? Born to lose? We just gave him a nudge." Cole chuckles, his scar twitching as he leans back. "Planted that baggie smooth as silk. Keeps the streets clean, right?" Nia's breath catches, her hand sliding into her blazer pocket, where a tiny recorder hums against her chest, capturing every word. Her heart pounds a fierce rhythm, adrenaline spiking as she realizes what she's got. This isn't just courtroom bravado. It's a confession, raw and unguarded. She sips her soda, keeping her eyes on the scratched counter, her mind racing. Could this be the key to unraveling their whole operation? She imagines Jamal's face, the despair in his eyes as the judge swallowed their lies and her resolve hardens. She's about to slip out, the recording burning a hole in her pocket, when a shadow falls over her. She looks up, and Hayes looms there, his bulk blocking the light from the overhead lamp. His beady eyes narrow, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You again?" he growls, his voice thick with suspicion. "What's a little thing like you doing in a place like this?" Nia freezes, her pulse hammering, but she forces her face into a mask of confusion, her voice small. "Just grabbing. A drink, sir. Long day." Cole slides out of the booth, sauntering over to join Hayes, his lean frame coiled like a snake ready to strike. He pops his gum, the sound sharp in the quiet diner, and tilts his head. "You were in court today, scribbling like a mouse. Now you're here. Funny coincidence." Nia's stomach twists, but she shrugs, playing the timid intern they've pegged her for. "I live nearby, just stopped in." Hayes steps closer, his boots scuffing the linoleum, and grabs her arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "Mind your own business, girl," he says, his breath hot with coffee and menace. "Folks who poke around end up like Jamal or worse." He squeezes harder, and Nia winces, her free hand brushing the recorder to make sure it's still running. She nods quickly, eyes wide with feigned fear. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean anything." Hayes holds her gaze for a beat, then lets go with a grunt, turning back to Cole. "She's nothing," he mutters, and they swagger back to their booth, laughing like they've won a prize. Nia exhales shakily, her arm throbbing where his fingers dug in. She grabs her backpack and slips out, the bell jingling again as she hits the street. The mist has thickened, cloaking the city in a grey haze, and she ducks into an alley, her hands trembling as she pulls out the recorder. She replays. The audio. Hayes's voice crackling through the tiny speaker, admitting to the frame-up, threatening her life. It's gold, pure gold, and she clutches it like a lifeline. She thinks she's safe now, thinks she's got the upper hand. Could this be the moment she flips the script on them? She imagines handing it over, watching their faces fall as the truth comes out. Her lips curve into a faint smile as she tucks the device back into her pocket, her steps quickening toward her apartment. She's still a ghost to them, a nobody they've underestimated, and that's her power. But as she rounds a corner, a prickle runs up her spine, a whisper of instinct she can't ignore. She glances back, seeing only shadows, but the feeling sticks. Have they marked her already? She reaches her building, a crumbling walk-up on the edge of downtown, and climbs the stairs to her third-floor unit. The hallway smells of mildew and fried onions, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She locks the door behind her, double-checking. The deadbolt. and sinks onto the sagging couch, the recorder in her lap. She plays it again, the words sinking deeper each time. Planted that baggie smooth as silk. End up like Jamal or worse. Her chest tightens with a mix of triumph and dread. This is evidence, real evidence, something Jamal's lawyer could use to blow their story apart. But it's also pure target on her back. Did Hayes mean that threat, or was it just bluster? She leans her head back, closing her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. She's got to get this to someone who can use it, someone who'll fight for Jamal when she can't. She thinks of Evelyn Ross, the lawyer she's seen in the courthouse halls, a woman with fire in her veins, despite the odds. Could Evelyn turn this into a weapon? Nia stands pacing the tiny room, her sneakers scuffing the worn carpet. She pulls out her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen, but hesitates. She can't call yet, not from here. She needs to be smart, needs to stay invisible. She tucks the recorder into a hidden pocket in her backpack, zipping it tight. Tomorrow she'll find a way to get it to Evelyn, anonymously if she can. She feels a surge of hope, a sense that she's finally struck back. What if this is the crack that brings the whole wall down? She imagines Hayes and Cole squirming, their lies exposed, Jamal walking free. She lets herself believe just for a moment that she's outsmarted them. She heads to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. The mist swirls under the streetlights, and for a second she thinks she sees a figure leaning against a lamppost watching. She blinks and it's gone. Her heart skips, but she shakes it off. She's safe, she tells herself. She's got the upper hand now. Or does she? The night stretches on, and Nia lies on the couch, her eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling. Sleep won't come, not with the recorder's weight pressing on her mind. She replays Hayes' grip on her arm, the way Cole's eyes glinted like he was sizing her up. They think she's nothing, a nuisance they can scare off. But they've marked her now, haven't they? She sits up, her pulse quickening. She thought she'd escaped their wrath, thought the recording was her shield. But what if they're already watching, already planning? She glances at the door, the deadbolt, still in place, and tells herself she's paranoid. She's still a ghost, still unseen. Yet as she settles back, the prickle returns, sharper now, a warning she can't ignore. She's stepped into their world, and they don't let go easy. What's their next move? Let's get your thoughts on this. Drop a comment number 1 if you think Nia's bravery is about to turn the tables, or comment number 2 if you reckon Hayes and Cole are too ruthless to let her win. Hit that like button if you're rooting for justice to strike back, and subscribe to catch the next twist. Because trust me, you won't see what's coming. So, what happens when Nia thinks she's safe, only to find the hunters closing in tighter than ever? Nia Jackson wakes to the grey light of dawn seeping through the blinds of her cramped Atlanta apartment, her arm still tender, where Detective Victor Hayes gripped it the night before. The recorder sits heavy in her backpack, its audio a ticking bomb she's determined to deliver. She pulls on a hoodie, her braids tucked under the hood, and slips out into the misty morning, her sneakers silent on the stairs. She's got a plan. Get the recording to Evelyn Ross, Jamal Carter's lawyer, without leaving a trace. She takes a winding route through downtown, cutting through alleys and past shuttered storefronts, her eyes darting to every shadow. The city hums awake, delivery trucks rattling over potholes, but Nia feels the weight of unseen eyes. She shakes it off, telling herself it's just nerves. She's still a ghost, still safe in her disguise. She clutches the backpack tighter, the promise of justice fueling her steps. At the Fulton County Courthouse, the air buzzes with the usual chaos. Lawyers barking into phones, clerks hauling stacks of files, defendants slumping on benches. Nia spots Evelyn Ross near the coffee cart, her grey curls wild and her arms full of folders. Evelyn's got a reputation for fighting lost causes, a tenacity Nia admires. She approaches, keeping her voice low. "Ms. Ross, I've got something. For Jamal's case. Can't say where it's from." Evelyn's sharp eyes flick up, narrowing as she takes the plain envelope Nia slides across the cart. Inside is a USB with the diner audio. No note, no fingerprints. "What's this?" Evelyn asks, her tone wary. Nia shrugs, playing the timid intern. Just listen, it's important. Evelyn tucks it into her bag, nodding once, and Nia slips away, her pulse steadying. She's done it, she thinks. She's struck the first real blow. Back in courtroom 3C, Nia takes her usual seat, the hard bench familiar under her slight frame. The room fills with the day's players, the pinched-faced judge, the slick prosecutor, Jamal in his orange jumpsuit, his eyes hollow. Hayes and Cole swagger in, their uniforms crisp, their smirks intact. Nia's stomach twists at the sight, but she keeps her face blank, her notepad ready. Evelyn stands, her voice cutting through the hum. Your Honor, we've received new evidence that challenges the officer's testimony. She holds up the USB and the room stills. The judge adjusts his glasses, peering down. Proceed. Evelyn plays the audio, and Hayes's voice fills the space, gruff and damning. Planted that baggie smooth as silk, keeps the streets clean. Gasps ripple through the gallery and Nia's heart leaps. She watches Hayes's smirk vanish, Cole's scar twitching as his jaw tightens. Have they finally slipped? The prosecutor jumps up, his pinstripe suit creasing as he waves a hand. This is unverified, no chain of custody. But Evelyn fires back. It's their voices, clear as day. We demand an investigation. The judge rubs his temples, his voice clipped. I'll allow it pending authentication. Officers, you're on notice. Nia's chest swells with a flicker of triumph. She's done it, she thinks again. She's cracked their armor. Hayes glares into the gallery, his beady eyes sweeping over her, but she ducks her head, scribbling nonsense to stay invisible. The session ends in a flurry, the judge calling a recess, and Nia slips out, her mind racing. She imagines Jamal's hope rekindling, the cops squirming under scrutiny. She's safe in her disguise, she tells herself, a nobody they'll never suspect. But as she steps into the hall, a chill runs through her. She doesn't see Hayes and Cole leave, but she feels their absence like a storm brewing. She heads for the exit, her sneakers scuffing the marble, when a clerk with a pinched nose and a stack of files brushes past her, muttering about that intern girl. Nia freezes, her breath catching. Did she hear right? She keeps moving, her hood up, but the prickle from last night returns, sharper now. She's halfway home, cutting through a park, when her phone buzzes. It's a burner she uses for emergencies, and the text is from an unknown number. They're asking about you. Clark's office. Her stomach drops. She stops under a dripping oak, the mist thickening around her. How did they know? She replays the day, the diner, the courthouse. She's been careful, hasn't she? But the text gnaws at her, a warning she can't ignore. By noon, she's back in court, her nerves taut as she slides into her seat. The judge reconvenes and Evelyn's pushing harder, citing the audio as proof of misconduct. Hayes and Cole sit stiffly, their smugness replaced by a tense edge. Then, the prosecutor drops a bomb. Your Honor, we've uncovered irregularities with a supposed paralegal intern. No credentials on file. We suspect tampering. He points to a folder, and the clerk Nia saw earlier steps forward, her voice nasal. She's been here daily. No ID, no registration. We traced her through security logs. Nia's blood runs cold. The judge peers over his glasses. Who? The clerk nods toward the back. Her. All eyes turn and Nia feels the weight of the room crash down. Hayes's smirk returns, slow and vicious as he locks onto her. The courtroom erupts, whispers swelling into a roar. Nia's heart hammers, her hands clenching her notepad. The judge bangs his gavel, demanding order. Identify yourself, he snaps. Nia stands, her legs shaky, her voice a whisper. I'm just an observer, sir, no one special. But the prosecutor pounces. She's connected to this audio. It's a setup. Evelyn looks stunned, her eyes darting to Nia, who shakes her head faintly, pleading silently. The judge's face hardens. If you're not registered, you're out. Now. Two bailiffs move toward her, their boots thudding, and Nia's mind races. She's exposed, her disguise shattered. She grabs her backpack, her fingers brushing the hidden recorder pocket, and lets them escort her out, Hayes's gaze burning into her back. The hallway blurs as they march her to the exit, the bailiff's grips firm on her arms. No loitering, one grunts, shoving her toward the glass doors. She stumbles into the mist, her hood falling back, her braids spilling free. The courthouse looms behind her, a fortress she's been cast out of. Her chest heaves, humiliation scorching her cheeks. She thought she'd struck a blow, thought the audio would shift the tide. But they've turned it against her, flipped the script with a speed she didn't see coming. How did they dig so fast? She replays the clerk's words, the security logs. They've been watching, haven't they? She's not a ghost anymore, she's a target. Her phone buzzes again, another text. They're not done. She stares at it, her breath ragged, the mist swallowing her silhouette. She ducks into a nearby alley, leaning against a brick wall, her mind spinning. The audio's still in play, Evelyn's still fighting, but Nia's out in the cold. She imagines, Hayes and Cole laughing, their smugness restored as they smear her as a fraud. Did they bribe the clerk? She clenches her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She's lost her leverage, her cover blown wide open. She thought she was safe, thought she'd outsmarted them. But they've got the system on their side, don't they? She slides down the wall, the damp concrete seeping through her jeans, and pulls her hood tighter. She's got nothing now, no way back in. Or does she? Her fingers brush the backpack, the recorder still there, a faint pulse of hope. They've marked her, but she's not finished. Not yet. She stands, wiping her face, the mist streaking her cheeks like tears. She's got to regroup, find a new angle. But as she steps out of the alley, a squad car rolls by, slow and deliberate, its headlights cutting through the haze. She freezes, her breath hitching. The windows are tinted, but she feels their eyes, Hayes and Cole's, locked on her. The E. Car idles for a moment, then peels away, leaving her trembling in the silence. They know where she is now, don't they? She's not just a nuisance anymore. She's prey. Her heart pounds a warning as she slips back into the shadows, the weight of their retaliation sinking in. She's lost this round, but the war's just begun. Nia Jackson trudges through the misty Atlanta twilight, her sneakers dragging on the cracked pavement as she heads back to her crumbling walk-up. The sting of her ejection from the Fulton County Courthouse burns fresh, her cheeks still hot with humiliation. Detectives Victor Hayes and Randall Cole have flipped her strike against her, turning her audio evidence into a weapon that's left her exposed. Her faded hoodie hangs heavy with dampness, her braids plastered to her neck, and her arm throbs where Hayes gripped her last night. She clutches her backpack, the recorder still tucked in its hidden pocket, a fragile lifeline she refuses to let go. The squad car she saw earlier lingers in her mind, its slow crawl a silent threat. She tells herself she's imagining things, that she's still got time to regroup. She needs a plan, needs to get back in the fight for Jamal Carter. But as she rounds the corner to her building, the air shifts, thick with something she can't tame. She climbs the creaking stairs, the hallway's mildew stench sharper tonight, and fumbles with her keys. Inside the apartment is a dim cave, the sagging couch her only comfort. She locks the door, double-checks the deadbolt, and sinks down, her breath ragged. The recorder sits in her lap, its weight a reminder of her fleeting victory. She replays, the diner audio in her head, Hayes' gruff confession, Cole's cold laugh. She's got to get it to Evelyn Ross again, find a way to make it stick despite the courtroom chaos. She pulls out her burner phone, typing a message to a drop point she's used before, a mailbox near the park. She'll send a copy tomorrow. Keep the original safe. Her eyes drift to the window, the blinds slanted just enough to show the street below. The mist swirls under the streetlights and she feels a flicker of calm. She's still in control, isn't she? She's got a backup plan now. She's about to stand when a shadow moves outside, quick and deliberate. Her heart jolts, and she ducks, low peering through the blinds. Two figures loom in the parking lot, their silhouettes broad and familiar, Hayes and Cole. Her pulse spikes, her breath shallow as she watches them stride toward the building, their boots crunching gravel. How did they find her? She scrambles to the couch, stuffing the recorder deeper into her backpack, her hands shaking. The stairs groan under heavy steps and she freezes, her mind racing. She thought she'd escaped their wrath, thought the courthouse setback was their only play. A fist pounds on her door, rattling the frame, and Hayes' voice booms through. Open up, girl, we know you're in there. Nia's chest tightens, fear clawing at her throat, but she forces herself to think. She's got seconds, maybe less. The door shudders again and she bolts to the kitchenette, grabbing a butcher knife from the drawer. She's not fighting, not yet, but she needs something. Cole's voice cuts in, sharp and mocking. "You've been busy, huh? Time to chat." The deadbolt holds, but a splintering crack tells her it won't last. She darts to the window, peering down at the fire escape 3 stories below. It's her only shot. The door buckles as she swings a leg over the sill, the cold metal biting her palms. A final crash and they're in, Hayes's bulk filling the doorway as she drops onto the ladder. "There!" Cole shouts, and she hears boots thundering toward her. She slides down, the rung slick with mist, and hits the ground hard, her ankle twisting. Pain flares, but she stumbles forward, clutching her backpack as she runs into the lot. Hayes and Cole burst out the building's side door, their flashlight beams slicing through the haze. Nia ducks behind a rusted dumpster, her breath hitching. As they fan out, Hayes's growl echoes. "You're done, little shadow, nowhere to hide." She presses against the metal, her heart hammering, the knife trembling in her hand. She thought she'd outsmarted them, thought the audio was her shield. Now she's prey hunted in her own backyard. Cole's beam sweeps close and she bolts, weaving between parked cars, her ankle screaming with every step. She hears Hayes grunt, his heavy steps closing in, and then a hand clamps her shoulder, yanking her back. She swings the knife wildly, catching air, and Hayes slams her against a sedan, her head cracking on the hood. Stars burst in her vision and the knife clatters away. Cole looms over her, his scar glinting as he grabs her arms, pinning them. Hayes leans in, his breath sour with coffee and rage. "You think you're smart, huh? Messing with us?" He backhands her, her cheek splitting under the blow, blood hot on her skin. Nia gasps, her knees buckling, but Cole holds her up, his grip iron. "Should have stayed out of it," he hisses, and drives a fist into her stomach. She doubles over, retching, her backpack slipping. Hayes snatches it, ripping it open, and finds the recorder. He smashes it under his boot, the crunch final and brutal. "No more games," he says, kicking her ribs as she crumples. Pain explodes, white-hot, and she curls into herself, tasting copper. They tower over her, their laughter a jagged edge, and Hayes kneels, his voice low. "Leave Atlanta or you disappear like the others, got it?" She nods weakly, playing broken, and they step back, satisfied. They walk away, their boots fading. Into the mist, leaving her sprawled in the gravel. Nia lies still, her body a map of bruises, blood trickling from her lip. She thought she'd escaped their wrath, thought she could fight from the shadows. Now she's a wreck, her evidence dust under Hayes's heel. She drags herself up, staggering to a lamppost, her breath shallow as she clutches her side. Her apartment's trashed, her covers blown, but she's alive. Barely. She limps to a payphone a block away, her vision swimming, and dials her secure line to a cloud server. Her voice rasps as she uploads the backup audio she synced last night, a precaution she'd almost forgotten. It's safe, untouchable, and she hangs up, a grim smile tugging at her split lip. She's got something left, doesn't she? She stumbles toward a bus stop, the mist cloaking her, believing she's regained a sliver of control. The bus wheezes to a stop and she climbs on, sinking into a seat, her hoodie hiding her battered face. The city blurs past, headlights smearing in the haze, and she replays the ambush. Hayes's fists, Cole's sneer, the recorder's ruin. They think they've crushed her, think she'll run, but the backup's her lifeline, a spark in the dark. She'll get it to Evelyn somehow and keep fighting. Her ribs ache with every breath, a reminder of their brutality, but she clenches her fists, her nails digging in. She's not done, not yet. The bus lurches, and she glances out the window, the night swallowing the streets. She's safe for now, she tells herself, her plan reforming. But as she steps off at her stop, her building looms ahead, and a new horror hits. Her doors ajar, light spilling out. She creeps closer, her pulse roaring, and peers inside. The place is ransacked, furniture flipped, drawers gutted. Her laptop's gone, stolen while she was out. Her stomach drops, the last shred of control slipping away. They're not finished with her, are they? Let's hear what you think. Drop a comment number 1 if you believe Nia's backup audio. We'll turn this nightmare around, or comment number 2 if you reckon Hayes and Cole's brutality has her cornered for good. Smash that like button if you're gripped by her fight against these monsters, and subscribe to see her next move, because this story's about to explode. So what happens when Nia's sanctuary shatters and the hunters strike deeper than she ever feared? Nia Jackson stands in the doorway of her ransacked Atlanta apartment. The splintered wood and overturned furniture, a gut punch after the beating she took from detectives Victor Hayes and Randall Cole. Her ribs scream with every breath, her face a swollen mess of bruises and blood, but the sight of her stolen laptop ignites a fresh fury. She limps inside, her sneakers crunching on shattered glass, and checks the hiding spot under a loose floorboard. Her emergency cash, $50 in, crumpled bills, is still there. She grabs it, stuffs it into her hoodie, and slings her torn backpack over her shoulder. The backup audio, safe on a cloud server, is her last weapon, and she's got to use it before they crush her completely. She locks the broken door as best she can, her hands shaking, and slips into the misty night, her ankle throbbing from the fire escape drop. She's got one shot left, and it's Evelyn Ross. She takes a bus across town, her hoodie pulled low to hide her battered face, the city's hum a dull roar in her ears. Every jolt of the vehicle jars her ribs, but she grits her teeth, her mind racing. Hayes and Cole think they've broken her, think the smashed recorder and trashed apartment are the end. She imagines their smug grins, their boots on her back, and her resolve hardens. She's not running, she's fighting. She gets off near a rundown motel on the edge of downtown, the neon sign flickering vacancy in sickly green. She pays cash for a room, the clerk barely glancing at her bruised cheek, and locks herself in. The room smells of stale smoke and mildew, the bed sagging under stained sheets, but it's a fortress for now. She pulls out her burner phone, her fingers trembling as she dials Evelyn's secure line. "It's me," she whispers when Evelyn picks up. "I've got more. Meet me tomorrow, 6 a.m., Piedmont Park by the Oak Grove." Sleep eludes her, the night stretching thin as she huddles on the bed, her hoodie a makeshift blanket. Her body aches, a map of their violence, but her mind churns with plans. She'll hand over the backup audio, let Evelyn wield it like a blade. She imagines Hayes and Cole squirming, the courthouse turning against them. By 5, she's up, splashing cold water on her face, the motel mirror showing a stranger with a split lip and blackened eye. She limps to the park, the dawn mist thick as soup, and finds Evelyn waiting under the gnarled oaks, her grey curls damp, her eyes sharp. Nia hands her a USB, her voice hoarse. "Same audio backed up. They beat me for it, but it's real." Evelyn's jaw tightens, her fingers closing around the drive. "You're sure?" Nia nods, wincing as her ribs protest. "Use it, please." Evelyn slips it into her coat, her voice low. "I'll make them pay." Nia believes her, doesn't she? She watches Evelyn vanish into the mist, a flicker of hope warming her chest. She limps back to the motel, her steps lighter despite the pain. She's done it, she thinks, struck back from the shadows. She spends the day holed up, sipping vending machine coffee, her burner buzzing with a text from Evelyn. Filed motion. Hearing tomorrow. Nia's heart leaps. She imagines the courtroom, the audio blasting Hayes and Cole's lies wide open. She lets herself smile, her split lips stinging, and thinks of Jamal Carter, his hollow eyes brightening. She's turned the tide, hasn't she? She rests, her body demanding it, and by evening she's steady enough to risk a trip to a diner. For food. The mist has lifted, the city buzzing under a bruised purple sky, and she feels a fragile calm. She's safe here, a ghost again, her victory close. The next morning she sneaks into the Fulton County Courthouse, her hoodie swapped for a borrowed jacket from the motel lost and found, her braids tucked under a cap. She slides into courtroom 3C, her heart pounding as she takes a seat near the back. The room fills fast, the judge's pinched face sterner than usual, Jamal slumping at the defense table. Hayes and Cole strut in, their uniforms crisp, but their smirks are gone, replaced by a tense edge. Evelyn stands, her voice ringing clear. "Your Honor, we have authenticated audio proving officers Hayes and Cole planted evidence and assaulted a witness." She plays the backup. Hayes's gruff, "planted that baggie smooth as silk," echoing off the walls, followed by his threat. "Disappear like the others." The gallery gasps, a juror's jaw dropping and Nia's chest swells. The prosecutor flails, his voice shrill. "This is inadmissible." But the judge slams his gavel, his glasses glinting. "Quiet. I'm ordering an investigation. Officers, you're suspended pending review." Nia's breath catches, a quiet joy flooding her. She watches Hayes's face darken, Cole's scar twitching as they whisper furiously with their lawyer. The judge adjourns and the room erupts, reporters swarming Evelyn, Jamal's head lifting, with a flicker of hope. Nia slips out, her cap low, her ribs aching but her spirit soaring. She's done it, hasn't she? She's flipped their game, sent them reeling. She imagines them sweating, their power crumbling, and heads for the motel. Her steps quick despite the limp. She's safe now, she tells herself, the system finally turning. She spends the day in hiding, her burner silent, her mind replaying the hearing. She celebrates quietly, a candy bar from the vending machine, her only indulgence, believing she's regained control. The suspension's a start, a crack in their armor. She'll keep pushing, won't she? Night falls, the motel room cloaked in shadows as she drifts into a fitful sleep, her body curled around her backpack. She dreams of Hayes and Cole in cuffs, Jamal walking free, her own bruises fading. The clock ticks past 3 when a siren jolts her awake, its wail slicing through the thin walls. She stumbles to the window, peering through the blinds, and sees flashing lights outside her building. Her heart sinks as boots pound the stairs, a fist hammering her door. "Police, open up!" She scrambles for her phone, her pulse roaring, but the door bursts open before she can dial. Uniformed officers flood in, their flashlights blinding. "Her?" And she raises her hands, her voice cracking. "What's happening?" A burly cop steps forward, his badge gleaming. "Nia Jackson, you're under arrest for drug possession." She blinks, stunned. "What?" They yank her up, her ribs screaming as they cuff her, cold metal biting her wrists. She twists, her eyes wild. "This is a mistake." But the cop shoves her toward the door, his voice flat. "Found a baggie in your car, cocaine. You're done?" Nia's mind reels, her breath hitching. Her car's parked blocks away, untouched since yesterday. She knows it's clean, knows this is a lie. Hayes and Cole's faces flash in her head, their suspension fueling a vicious counterstrike. They've planted it, haven't they? She's dragged downstairs, the motel's neon sign casting a sickly glow on the squad car waiting below. Neighbors peek from windows, their whispers a hum of judgment, and she's shoved inside, the door slamming shut. Her cap falls off, her braids spilling free, and she stares out, her victory dissolving into a nightmare. The precinct is a blur of harsh lights and concrete walls, her cuffs chafing as they march her to a holding cell. The booking officer, wiry man with a sneer, fingerprints her, his voice dripping scorn. "Thought you could play hero, huh?" She glares, her split lip trembling. "Check my car. It's a setup." He laughs, shoving her into the cell, the bars clanging shut. She sinks onto the cot, her body a throbbing wreck, her mind spinning. She thought she'd turned the tide, thought the suspension was her win. But they've struck back, harder and faster, framing her with the same trick they pulled on Jamal. Her ribs ache, a reminder of their fists, and now their powers caged her too. She curls up, the cold seeping through the thin mattress, and stares at the ceiling, her backup audio useless behind bars. They've flipped the script again, haven't they? She's lost everything now, her fight snuffed out in a single night. Nia Jackson sits on the cold steel cot of her holding cell in the Atlanta precinct, the clang of the bars still ringing in her ears as the booking officer's sneer fades down the hall. Her wrists chafe under the cuffs, her ribs a throbbing knot. From detectives Victor Hayes and Randall Cole's ambush, and her face a swollen mask of bruises. The fabricated drug charge they've pinned on her, a baggie of cocaine planted in her car, has flipped her fleeting courtroom victory into a suffocating trap. The cell stinks of sweat and bleach, the walls scratched with names and curses, and the fluorescent light buzzes overhead, casting harsh shadows. She curls her knees to her chest, her hoodie damp with sweat and mist, and replays the last 12 hours. She thought she'd won, thought suspending Hayes and Cole would loosen their grip. Now she's caged, their retaliation a steel vise around her throat. How did they pull this off so fast? Footsteps echo outside, and 2 guards swagger up, their uniforms crisp, their eyes glinting with malice. The taller one, a beefy man with a shaved head and a gold tooth, bangs his baton on the bars, the sound a jolt through her spine. "Well, well, look at the little troublemaker," he drawls, his Georgia accent thick. "Thought you could mess with Hayes and Cole, huh, girl?" The shorter guard, wiry with a pockmarked face, leans in, his breath sour. "Black trash like you don't belong in our courthouse. Should have stayed in your lane." Nia's stomach twists, her split lip trembling, but she keeps her eyes steady, refusing to flinch. She knows they're in on it, knows this precinct's a nest of snakes loyal to her enemies. "I didn't do anything," she says, her voice raspy but firm. "That baggie's a lie." The tall guard laughs, a harsh bark. "Tell it to the judge, sweetheart." "Oh, wait, he ain't listening." They circle the cell like vultures, their taunts a barrage she can't escape. "Heard you're a druggie now," the wiry one says, tapping his baton on his palm. "Fits the profile, don't it? Always the same with your kind." Nia's fists clench, her nails digging into her palms, rage simmering beneath her fear. She's trapped, her backup audio useless behind bars, her fight for Jamal Carter slipping away. The tall guard leans close, his gold tooth flashing. "Hayes says you're lucky to be breathing. Next time you won't be." Her heart stutters, but she holds his gaze, her mind racing. She needs out, needs to reach Evelyn Ross. Can she outsmart these goons? She scans the cell, spotting a janitor mopping the hall, his head down, his grey uniform blending into the gloom. The guards tire of her silence, their laughter fading as they strut off, promising to check on her later. Nia exhales, her breath shaky, and waits until the janitor shuffles closer. He's older, his face lined with exhaustion, his dark skin a quiet defiance in this hostile place. She leans toward the bars, her voice a whisper. "Sir, please, I need help." He glances up, his eyes wary, and she presses on. "They framed me. I've got proof, but I'm stuck. Can you get a note to Evelyn Ross, Jamal Carter's lawyer?" He hesitates, his mop stalling, and she pulls a scrap of paper from her hoodie, scribbling with a stub of pencil she'd hidden in her sleeve. "Please, tell her I'm here and the audio's still alive." He nods once, a flicker of understanding in his gaze, and tucks the note into his pocket, moving on without a word. Nia sinks back, her chest tight. Did he believe her? Hours crawl. By the cell a frigid tomb, her bruises pulsing with every shift. She replays the janitor's nod, clinging to it like a lifeline. If he gets through, Evelyn might bail her out, might keep the fight alive. She imagines Hayes and Cole smirking, thinking they've crushed her, and her resolve hardens. She's not done, not yet. Footsteps return and she braces herself, expecting more taunts. But it's a different guard, a woman with a stern face and a clipboard. "Jackson, you're out. Bail's posted." Nia blinks, stunned. "Who?" The guard shrugs. "Some lawyer, move it." Her heart leaps as she's uncuffed, her wrists raw and led through the precinct's maze. She steps into the lobby and there's Evelyn, her grey curls wild, her eyes blazing. "You okay?" Evelyn asks, her voice low. Nia nods, wincing as she adjusts her hoodie. "Thanks to you." Evelyn guides her outside, the dawn breaking over Atlanta in streaks of gold and grey. "Got your note," she says, her tone clipped. "That audio's still in play. We're not stopping." Nia's chest swells, a fragile hope blooming. She's free, isn't she? She's back in the game, Hayes and Cole's trap sprung. They climb into Evelyn's beat-up sedan, the engine coughing to life, and Nia lets herself breathe, her ribs protesting. She imagines the courtroom, the audio blasting their lies again, Jamal's freedom closer. She's safe now, she tells herself, Evelyn's fire her shield. They pull into traffic, the city waking around them, and Nia feels a flicker of triumph. She's outsmarted the jailhouse, hasn't she? She glances at Evelyn, who's focused on the road, and allows a faint smile, her split lip stinging. She's got a chance to strike back. They stop at a diner, a different one, its windows steamed, with morning heat. Evelyn orders coffee, and Nia sips water, her hands trembling as she recounts the ambush, the arrest. Evelyn listens, her jaw tight, and nods. "We'll use this. Assault, intimidation, another frame-up. They're digging their own grave." Nia believes her. clinging to the promise of justice. She's free, her fight alive, and she imagines Hayes and Cole reeling, their suspension and noose tightening. She steps outside for air, the sun warming her bruised face, and thinks she's turned the tide. But as she leans against the diner's brick wall, her burner buzzes with a news alert. She pulls it out, her eyes scanning the screen, and her stomach drops. "Officers Hayes and Cole targeted by drug addict fraud," the headline screams, a grainy photo of her arrest splashed beneath. The story spins her drug charge into a tale of vengeance, painting her as a junkie out to smear honest cops. Her breath hitches, the world tilting. She stumbles back inside, showing Evelyn, who curses under her breath. "They've gone public," Evelyn says, her voice grim. "Leaked it to bury you." Nia's chest caves, her victory dissolving into ash. She thought she'd escaped, thought freedom meant control. Now she's a pariah, the city's eyes on her, allies turning away. The diner's chatter fades, her pulse roaring as she imagines Hayes and Cole laughing, their retaliation a public guillotine. Did they plan this all along? She sinks into the booth, her bruises pulsing, her hope gutted. Evelyn grabs her arm, her grip firm. "We're not done. We'll fight this too." But Nia's not sure, not anymore. She's free, but she's exposed, isn't she? The system's claws are deeper than she feared, and they've shredded her name. She stares out, the window, the sun mocking her, and wonders if she's lost more than she can reclaim. Let's get your take on this twist. Drop a comment number 1 if you think Nia's grit will claw her back from this smear campaign, or comment number 2 if you believe Hayes and Cole's public strike has crushed her for good. Hit that like button if this injustice has you fired up, and subscribe to see if she rises from these ashes, because the next chapter's a game changer. So, what happens when Nia's name is trash and the hunters unleash a blow she never saw coming? Nia Jackson huddles in a safe house on Atlanta's outskirts, a ramshackle trailer Evelyn Ross secured, after the precinct's smear campaign turned her into a public pariah. The trailer smells of mothballs and rust, its thin walls trembling in the late-night wind, but it's a refuge from the city's judging eyes. Her ribs ache from Hayes and Cole's beating, her face a patchwork of fading bruises, and her name now synonymous with drug addict fraud, thanks to their leaked lies. She sits on a creaky cot, her hoodie swapped for a borrowed flannel, her braids loose and tangled. Her burner phone glows in her lap, the news alert still searing her mind. She's lost everything: her apartment, her cover, her reputation. But the backup audio, safe on the cloud, burns in her thoughts. A ember she refuses to let die. She's got to fight back, expose the rot deeper than Hayes and Cole. Can she still turn this around? She pulls out a prepaid laptop Evelyn bought, its keys sticky but functional, and logs into a secure server she's used since law school. Her fingers fly, bruised but steady, as she hacks into precinct records, a skill she honed chasing corruption cases. She's a ghost again, slipping through digital cracks, her breath shallow as files load. She finds arrest logs, internal memos, a goldmine of dirt. Hayes and Cole's names pop up in dozens of cases, patterns of planted evidence, missing footage, dismissed complaints from black neighborhoods. Her heart races as she digs deeper, uncovering a network. Payoffs to judges, deals with local gangs, a web of cops shielding each other. She downloads it all, her pulse pounding a fierce rhythm. This isn't just about Jamal Carter anymore. It's a hydra she's got to slay. She imagines their faces when this hits, their smugness crumbling. Is this her chance? By dawn, her eyes burn, but she's got enough to sink them. She emails the files to a local journalist, Tasha Grant, a muckraker, known for fearless exposés. Nia keeps it anonymous, her message short. Corruption in the 5th Precinct. Check the attachments. She hits send, her breath catching, and collapses onto the cot, exhaustion tugging at her bones. She imagines the story breaking, the public. Waking up, Hayes and Cole scrambling. She's struck back, hasn't she? She drifts into a fitful sleep, the wind howling outside, dreaming of justice clawing its way free. Hours later, her burner buzzes, jolting her awake. It's Tasha. This is Dynamite publishing tomorrow. Nia's chest swells, a grim smile tugging at her split lip. She's turned the tide, she tells herself, her counter-strike launched. The next morning, she risks a trip to a gas station, her flannel hood up, her cap low. She grabs a coffee and a newspaper, her hands trembling as she unfolds it. The headline screams, "Atlanta cops linked to gang payoffs, frame-ups." Tasha's story spills across the front page, the precinct files laid bare, Hayes and Cole's names in bold. Nia's heart leaps, her bruises forgotten. She scans the details. Falsified reports, witness intimidation, cash trails to a drug crew on the south side. The city explodes, protesters flooding the courthouse steps by noon, their chants a roar she hears from miles away. She slips back to the trailer, her steps quick despite the limp, and checks her burner. Evelyn texts, "Subpoenas issued, they're on the ropes." Nia believes it, doesn't she? She's regained momentum, the public's fury her shield. She spends the day monitoring news feeds, the trailer's TV crackling with live shots of the protests. Talking heads dissect the expose, activists demand arrests, and the precinct scrambles, their press conference a mess of stammers and denials. Nia imagines Hayes and Cole sweating, their suspension now a spotlight they can't dodge. She's safe here, she thinks, the trailer a bunker, her fight alive again. She paces, her ribs protesting, but her spirit soars. She's flipped there. Game, hasn't she? The subpoenas mean court, mean evidence, mean justice for Jamal and every name in those files. She lets herself hope, her fingers tracing the laptop's edge, believing she's cornered them at last. The wind dies down, the night settling over the trailer, and she feels a rare calm, her victory close enough to taste. But as dusk falls, her burner buzzes again. A call this time. She answers, her voice low. "Yeah?" It's Tasha, her tone urgent. "They're hitting back. Check the news." Nia's stomach drops as she flips on the TV, the screen flashing. Red with a breaking alert. "Teen abducted amid cop scandal," the anchor says, and Jamal Carter's face fills the frame, his hollow eyes staring back. Nia's breath stops, her hands clenching the cot. The report says he vanished from his house, witnesses spotting a black van peeling away. A chilling note was left, "Retract the lies or he's gone." Nia's mind reels, Hayes and Cole's names screaming in her head. They've kidnapped him, haven't they? She thought she'd won, thought the expose was her hammer. Now they've struck back, harder and bloodier, proving they'll burn it all down before they fall. She stumbles to the laptop, her vision blurring as she pulls up the files again, searching for clues. Her hands shake, her ribs a dull raw, but she finds it. A gang contact tied to Hayes, a thug named Rico with a rap sheet a mile long. She maps his haunts, her mind racing. She's got to find Jamal, got to stop this. She grabs a taser from Evelyn's stash, her fingers wrapping around its grip, and limps to the door. The night swallowing her silhouette. She thought she'd regained momentum, thought the public's rage would cage them. But they've escalated, their desperation a blade at Jamal's throat. She slips into the shadows, her cap low, her resolve a jagged edge. She'll track them, won't she? She can't let him die. She hails a cab with her last $10, directing it to a dive bar Rico's known to haunt, her heart pounding as the city blurs past. The bar's a squat brick hole, its windows blacked out, the air thick with cigarette smoke as she steps inside. She spots Rico at the back, his shaved head gleaming under a neon sign, his crew laughing over beers. She lingers near the jukebox, her taser hidden, her ears straining. Rico brags about handling a problem for the badges, his voice slurring but clear. Nia's blood runs cold, her fingers tightening. She's close, isn't she? She slips out, dialing Evelyn from a payphone, her voice a hiss. "They've got Jamal, Rico's crew, send help." Evelyn swears, promising cops she trusts, but Nia's not waiting. She's got to act, hasn't she? She tails Rico as he staggers out, her limp slowing her, but the mist cloaks her steps. He climbs into a van, the same black one from the news, and peels off. She flags another cab, her cash gone, promising the driver a tip she can't pay. They follow, the van weaving through back streets, and Nia's heart hammers, her taser a lifeline. She thought she'd cornered them, thought the subpoenas were her win. Now Jamal's life hangs by a thread, their retaliation a noose she can't cut. The van stops at a warehouse, its windows boarded, and Nia slips out, crouching in the shadows. She hears a muffled cry. Jamal's voice, and her resolve snaps into focus. She's got to get in, got to save him. But as she creeps closer, a spotlight flares, pinning her in its beam, and Rico's laugh cuts through the night. "Gotcha," he says, and she freezes, her victory a mirage shredded by their ruthless play. Nia Jackson crouches in the shadows outside the abandoned warehouse on Atlanta's south side, her breath shallow, as Rico's spotlight pins her like a moth under glass. The taser trembles in her grip, her ribs a throbbing cage from haze and coals beating, her flannel soaked with mist and sweat. She tracked Rico here, the gang thug tied to the cops, after hearing Jamal Carter's muffled cry from inside. Her heart pounds a frantic beat, her mind reeling from the exposé's fallout. The subpoenas, the protests, and now this brutal counterstrike. She thought she'd cornered Hayes and Cole, thought the public's rage would bind them. But they've kidnapped Jamal, their desperation a blade she's racing to dodge. Rico steps forward, his shaved head gleaming, his crew fanning out with bats and chains. "Thought you'd play hero, huh?" he sneers, his voice a gravelly taunt. Nia's stomach knots, but she's got no time to freeze. She bolts, her limp, slowing her as she weaves through rusted machinery littering the lot. Rico's laugh chasing her. Her ankle screams, a remnant of the fire escape drop, but she ducks behind a stack of crates, her breath hitching. She hears Jamal again, a choked sob from the warehouse, and her resolve snaps into focus. Can she get to him before they snap his neck? She peers out, spotting Rico's crew spreading thin, their flashlights slicing the dark. She grips the taser, its hum of faint comfort, and maps her move. The warehouse doors ajar, a sliver of light spilling out, and she sprints for it, her sneakers skidding on gravel. A thug lunges, his bat swinging, but she ducks, the wind of it ruffling her braids. She's inside, the air thick with dust and oil, Jamal's cries louder now. The warehouse is a cavern of shadows, broken beams and stacked barrels looming like ghosts. Nia creeps forward, her taser raised, her eyes darting to every creak. She spots Jamal tied to a chair in the center, his face bloodied, his orange jumpsuit torn. Two of Rico's men guard him, their backs to her, laughing about, teaching the kid a lesson. Her chest tightens, rage flaring as she edges closer, her limp a whisper on the concrete. She's got one shot, doesn't she? She lunges, jamming the taser into the taller thug's neck. His body jerking as volts surge through him. He collapses, a heap of twitching muscle, and the second spins, his knife flashing. Nia dodges, the blade grazing her arm, blood hot on her skin, and kicks his knee hard. He stumbles, and she tasers him too, his scream cut short as he crumples. Jamal's eyes widen, his voice a rasp. "Nia!" She rips the ropes off, her hands shaking, and hauls him up, his skinny frame trembling. "We're out," she hisses, dragging him toward the door. Sirens wail in the distance, Evelyn's promised help closing in, and Nia's heart leaps. She's done it, hasn't she? She's saved him, turned their play into her win. They stumble, into the lot, the mist swirling, and she thinks they've escaped the worst. The warehouse looms behind them, a silent beast, and she pushes Jamal toward a ditch, her taser still clutched tight. "Run," she says, her voice raw, and he nods, bolting as the sirens grow louder. She turns, ready to follow, when a roar splits the night. Flames erupt from the warehouse, a fireball swallowing the door she just crossed, the heat slamming her back. Nia hits the ground, her ribs cracking against stone, her vision swimming as fire licks the sky. She scrambles up, her arm bleeding, her lungs burning with smoke. Hayes and Cole emerge from the shadows, their uniforms singed, their faces twisted with fury. "You don't quit, do you?" Hayes growls, his buzz cut glinting in the blaze. Cole's scar stretches as he smirks, a Molotov cocktail smoldering in his hand. "Should have run when we told you." Nia's stomach drops, her taser useless against this. They've torched it, haven't they? She thought she'd saved Jamal, thought the sirens meant safety. Now they've flipped it, planting evidence in the ashes to frame her for arson. Hayes advances, his fists clenched, but the sirens scream closer, red and blue lights piercing the mist. He hesitates, Cole grabbing his arm. "Cops!" Cole hisses, and they vanish into the dark, leaving her choking in the haze. Firefighters burst onto the scene, their hoses blasting as Nia staggers back, her flannel charred, her arm dripping blood. She spots Jamal safe behind a squad car, his eyes locked on her, and relief floods her chest. She saved him, she tells herself, clinging to that shred of victory. But a cop grabs her, his grip rough, his voice sharp. "Hands up, you're under arrest." She blinks, dazed, her taser falling as cuffs snap on her wrists again. "What?" she croaks, smoke rasping her throat. "Arson," he snaps, shoving her toward a cruiser. "Witnesses saw you running out." Her mind reels, Hayes and Coles, silhouettes flashing in her head. They've set her up, haven't they? She thought she'd escaped, thought Jamal's freedom was her win. Now she's cuffed, the blaze a trap she's tumbled into. The precinct's a familiar hell. It's concrete, walls closing in as they book her again, her fingerprints smudged with soot. The officer, a squat man with a buzz cut like Hayes, sneers as he logs her. "Lighting fires now, huh? Real smart." Nia's voice cracks, her ribs a dull roar. "It's a lie. They did it." He laughs, shoving her into a cell, the bars slamming shut. She sinks onto the cot, her body a wreck, her arm throbbing where the knife grazed her. She saved Jamal, didn't she? She sees his face, safe beyond the flames, and clings to that. But the arson charge looms, a noose Hayes and Cole tightened, with a match. Her burner's gone, confiscated, her backup audio useless behind bars. She thought she'd turned the tide, thought the sirens were her salvation. Now she's buried deeper, their retaliation a fire she can't douse. She curls up, the cell's chill seeping through her charred flannel, her mind spinning. She replays the warehouse, the taser's hum, Jamal's cry. She got him out, but at what cost? Footsteps echo and a guard peers in, his eyes cold. "Your lawyer's coming. Better hope she's good." Nia nods faintly, her hope a flicker in the dark. Evelyn will fight, won't she? She imagines Hayes and Cole gloating, their suspension a mask for this brutal play. They framed her again, flipped her rescue into a crime. Her arm bleeds through the flannel, a slow drip on the cot, and she stares at it, her resolve fraying. She thought she'd won a piece of the war, thought Jamal's freedom was her shield. But they've struck back, their ruthlessness ablaze. She's trapped in, and she wonders if she's got anything left to fight with. The night drags, the cell a tomb of flickering light and distant shouts. Nia's bruises pulse, her ribs a cage of pain, but her mind churns. She saved Jamal, didn't she? That's something, a spark she can't let them snuff out. She imagines Evelyn storming in, the audio still alive, the exposé still burning. But the arson charge looms, a lie she can't disprove from here. Hayes and Cole's laughter echoes in her head, their power a wall she's slammed against. She thought she'd escaped the worst, thought the flames were their defeat. Now she's cuffed again, her victory ashes in her mouth, and she wonders how deep their claws reach. She closes her eyes, her breath shallow, and vows to claw back somehow. They've won this round, haven't they? What's your take on this fiery twist? Drop a comment number 1 if you think Nia's rescue of Jamal will fuel her comeback, or comment number 2 if you reckon this arson frame-up has torched her last hope. Smash that like button if this showdown's got you hooked, and subscribe to catch her next stand, because this fight's far from over. So what happens when Nia's locked up again, and the hunters turn her triumph into a blazing trap? Nia Jackson sits shackled in the back of a Fulton County courtroom, her wrists raw from cuffs, her charred flannel swapped for a jail-issued jumpsuit that hangs loose on her bruised frame. The arson-charged detectives Victor Hayes and Randall, Cole pinned on her after torching the warehouse, weighs heavy, her rescue of Jamal Carter twisted into a crime she can't shake. Her ribs throb from their beating, her arm bandaged where a thug's knife grazed her, and her braids hang limp, matted with sweat and soot. The cell's cold still clings to her bones, but she's here facing the chaos she sparked. She's fired her public defender, opting to represent herself. Her law school smart's her only weapon. The room buzzes with tension, the judges pinched. Face stern behind the bench, Jamal safe but silent at Evelyn Ross's side. Hayes and Cole sit across the aisle, their uniforms traded for cheap suits, their suspension a thin mask for their defiance. Can Nia turn this trap into their downfall? She stands, her voice hoarse but steady, as the judge peers over his glasses. "Ms. Jackson, you're charged with arson. Plea?" She lifts her chin, her split lip stinging. "Not guilty, Your Honor, and I've got evidence to prove it." The prosecutor, a wiry man with a hawkish nose, smirks, his briefcase snapping open. "She was seen fleeing the scene, Your Honor. We've got witnesses." Nia fires back, her hands trembling but her words sharp. "Those witnesses work for the real culprits, Officers Hayes and Cole. I've got files proving their corruption." She nods to Evelyn, who slides a USB across the defense table, her grey curls wild with determination. Nia's heart pounds as she lays out the precinct records she hacked, her voice rising. "Falsified reports, gang payoffs, intimidation. They framed Jamal Carter, beat me, and burned that warehouse to silence us." The gallery murmurs, a juror's eyes widening as Nia projects the files onto a screen, her fingers clumsy on the borrowed laptop. She points to dates, names, cash trails linking Hayes and Cole to Rico's crew. "They kidnapped Jamal to stop this," she says, her gaze locking on the cops. Hayes's buzz-cut bristles, his fists clenching, while Cole's scar twitches. His smirk gone. The prosecutor leaps up, his voice shrill. "This is irrelevant. She's deflecting." But Nia cuts in, her ribs aching as she leans forward. "It's motive, Your Honor. They've got a pattern, and I'm their latest target." The judge rubs his temples, his voice clipped. "I'll hear it. Proceed." Nia's chest swells, a flicker of hope igniting. She's got their attention, doesn't she? She plays the backup audio. Hayes's gruff planted that baggy, smooth as silk echoing through the room, followed by his threat. "Disappear like the others." Gasps ripple, and she stacks witness statements from Jamal's neighbors, their shaky voices recounting the black van, the fire. "They did this," she says, pointing at Hayes and Cole. "Not me." The prosecutor flails, his objections a frantic dance, but the judge overrules, his glasses glinting. "Enough, I'm dismissing the arson charge for insufficient evidence." Nia's breath catches, relief flooding her as the cuffs come off, her wrists free at last. She glances at Evelyn, who nods, her eyes fierce. The judge turns to Hayes and Cole, his voice cold. "You're detained for investigation. Bailiffs, take them." Nia's heart leaps, their suits crumpling as they're cuffed, Hayes's glare a dagger she meets with steel. She's won, hasn't she? The courtroom erupts, reporters scribbling, spectators whispering as Hayes and Cole are hauled out, their boots dragging. Nia sinks into her chair, her body a wreck but her spirit soaring. She imagines Jamal breathing free, the precincts rot, exposed. She's safe now, she tells herself, the system bending at last. Evelyn grips her shoulder, her voice low. "You did it, kid." Nia nods, her split lip curving into a faint smile, believing she's turned the tide. She gathers her papers, her hands steady despite the pain, and heads for the exit, her limp pronounced but her head high. The courthouse steps gleam under the midday sun, protesters cheering as she emerges, their signs a sea of support. She breathes, deep, the air crisp, thinking justice is hers. But as she steps into the crowd, a roar splits the calm, fists flying as a riot ignites. She stumbles, her ribs screaming as bodies shove past, the cheers turning to shouts. A brick sails overhead, shattering a window, and she ducks, her eyes darting. Protesters clash with cops, their batons swinging, and Nia's stomach drops. Did her win spark this? She spots Hayes and Cole's allies in the fray, their uniforms a blur as they charge her, their faces twisted with rage. "You're dead, girl," one yells, his fist grazing her jaw as she twists away. Her vision swims, blood trickling from her lip, and she scrambles through the chaos, her limp slowing her. She thought she'd caged them, thought dismissal was her shield. Now their crew's unleashed, their retaliation a storm she's caught in. A protester grabs her arm, pulling her to safety behind a barricade, his voice urgent. "They're after you." Nia nods, panting, her hope fraying as the riot swells. She crouches, her bandaged arm throbbing, the crowd's roar deafening. She sees Hayes and Cole led to a van, their cuffs glinting, but their allies keep coming, their batons cracking skulls. She thought detention was the end, thought justice would hold. Sirens wail, tear gas hissing as cops push back, and Naya's rescuer shoves her toward an alley. "Go!" he shouts, and she runs, her sneakers pounding pavement, her ribs afire she ignores. She reaches the shadows, her breath ragged, and glances back. The riot's a beast, swallowing the steps, and she imagines Hayes and Cole gloating, their power unbroken. She leans against a wall, her flannel soaked with sweat, believing she's escaped their wrath again. But her burner buzzes, a text from Evelyn. They're out. Technicality. Her stomach sinks, the world tilting as their release hits her like a punch. She stumbles deeper into the alley, her mind reeling. She thought she'd won in there, thought the judge's order was iron. Now they're free, their allies a mob she's sparked, and she's prey again. Her ribs ache, a reminder of their fists, and now their system's flexed its muscles, spitting. Them back out. She checks the text again, her hands trembling. Evelyn's words a knife. Stay low. They're hunting. Nia's chest caves, her victory a mirage shredded by their pull. She thought the files, the audio, the dismissal were her hammer, thought Jamal's safety was her win. But they've flipped it, their freedom a noose tightening around her. She slides down the wall, her cap falling off, her braids spilling free, and stares into the mist. She's lost the round, hasn't she? The alley's a cold refuge, its brick damp against her back as she catches her breath, the riot's echo fading. She replays the courtroom, her voice cutting through their lies, the cuffs on their wrists. She had them, didn't she? But their allies, their reach, have turned her strike into chaos. She imagines them laughing, their cheap suits traded back for uniforms, their hunt renewed. Her burner's battery blinks low, her only link to Evelyn, and she clutches it, her resolve a flicker in the dark. She's got to regroup, got to fight smarter. But as she stands, her limp worse now, a squad car rolls by, slow and deliberate, its headlights sweeping the alley's mouth. She freezes, her pulse roaring. Knowing it's them, isn't it? They're not done, and she's not safe. Nia Jackson ducks deeper into the Atlanta alley, her breath ragged as the squad car's headlights sweep past, its engine a low growl fading into the mist. Her ribs throb from the courtroom riot, her jumpsuit swapped back for a charred flannel, her braids tangled with sweat and grime. Detectives Victor Hayes and Randall Cole are free on a technicality, their allies' chaos a shield that's turned her courtroom win into a hollow echo. She clutches her dying burner phone. Evelyn Ross is warning. They're hunting, a blade in her gut. She's a pariah, her name trashed, her evidence useless against their pull. She limps toward a payphone, her cap lost, her arms bandaged, soaked with blood from the warehouse graze. She needs help, needs a new angle. Can she trust anyone now? She dials a number from memory, her voice a rasp, as Marcus Tate picks up, a rogue cop she met months ago during a sting. Marcus, it's Nia, I'm in deep. Hayes and Cole, they're after me. His tone is gruff but steady. Heard about the mess, where you at? She hesitates, her pulse spiking, then gives the alley's cross streets. Bring evidence, she says. Anything on the 5th precinct. He grunts agreement, promising to meet her at a shuttered gas station nearby. She hangs up, her hands trembling, and limps through the shadows, the mist cloaking her steps. Marcus is a risk, but he's got dirt, doesn't he? She imagines his files, a lifeline to sink Hayes and Cole deeper. She reaches the station, its pumps rusted husks, and waits, her flannel damp against her bruises. Marcus rolls up in a beat-up pickup, his broad frame hunched, his dark skin etched with scars from years on the force. He steps out, a duffel slung, over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the dark. You look like hell, he says, tossing her a water bottle. She catches it, her ribs protesting, and gulps it down, her throat raw. Got something? She asks, her voice urgent. He nods, unzipping the bag to reveal folders, photos, a USB stick. Precinct stash, gang ties, payoffs, Hayes and Cole's prints all over it. Nia's heart leaps, her fingers brushing the files. She flips through, seeing Rico's name, bank records, a photo of Hayes shaking hands with a thug. This is it, she breathes, imagining their faces when it hits court. She's got them now, hasn't she? They climb into the truck, Marcus peeling out as she digs into the stash, her mind racing. How'd you get this? She asks, her eyes on a ledger. He shrugs. his voice low. Been watching them, tired of the rot. She believes him, clinging. To his words, her hope surging. They head for an old precinct outpost, a storage site he says holds more. One last haul, he promises, and she nods, her taser tucked in her waistband, a precaution she can't shake. The outpost looms ahead, a squat brick box ringed by chain link, its windows blacked out. Marcus cuts the engine, his flashlight beam slicing the night as they slip through a gate he unlocks with a key. Nia's limp slows her, but she follows. The stash awaits she'll wield like a hammer. She's close, isn't she? Inside, the air is thick with dust, shelves sagging under boxes of files. Marcus leads her to a corner, his flashlight dancing over labels. Here, he says, pulling a crate free, its lid creaking as he opens it. More photos spill out, body cam logs, witness recantations tied to Hayes and Cole. Nia's chest swells, her fingers trembling as she stuffs them into her duffel. This'll bury them, she says, imagining Evelyn slamming it on the judge's desk. Marcus nods, his scar glinting, and she thinks she's turned the tide. Thought this raid is her. Win. They're about to leave when his flashlight flicks off, plunging them into dark. Her heart jolts, her hand on the taser. Marcus, she whispers, but his silhouette shifts and a cold laugh cuts through the silence. You're too easy, he says, his voice ablade as he steps back, his gun gleaming in the faint moonlight. Nia's stomach drops, her breath hitching. What? He smirks, his scars twisting. Hayes and Cole send their regards. Her mind reels. Betrayal, a punch she didn't see. He's their mole, isn't he? She thought he was her ally, thought his dirt was her salvation. Now he's sold her out, the stash a lure to trap her. She lunges for the door, her ribs screaming, but he grabs her arm, yanking her back, his gun at her temple. You're done, he growls, dragging her outside, the mist swallowing them. She twists, her taser sparking, but he slams her against the fence, the jolt missing as her weapon clatters away. Headlights flare, a black van rolling up, Hayes and Cole stepping out, their cheap suits traded for menace. Hayes's buzz-cut bristles as he towers over her, his fists clenched. Told you to run, he says, his voice a low rumble. Cole's scar stretches, his smirk vicious. Now you pay. Nia's chest caves, her hope gutted as Marcus hands her over, his duffel tossed to Cole. She thought she'd won with the stash, thought Marcus was her edge. Now they've flipped it, their trap snapping shut. Hayes grabs her throat, lifting her off the ground, her feet dangling as she gasps, her ribs afire she can't douse. You're nothing, he spits, and hurls her into the dirt, her body crumpling. Cole kicks her, his boot cracking her side, and she curls up, blood pooling in her mouth. They drag her to a ditch, her flannel tearing as gravel bites her skin, and Marcus pulls a shovel from the van. No loose ends, he says, digging a shallow grave, the earth soft with mist. Nia's vision swims, her arms bandage unraveling, but she claws at the ground, her resolve a dying spark. She thought she'd bury them, thought the files were her hammer. Now they're burying her, their retaliation a tomb she's trapped in. Hayes kneels, his breath sour. Should have listened, girl. They roll her in, her body thudding into the hole, and start piling dirt, the weight crushing. Her chest. She gasps, her hands scrabbling, her mind screaming. She saved Jamal, didn't she? She exposed them, didn't she? But Marcus's betrayal, their ruthlessness, have flipped it all, and darkness closes in. She chokes on soil, her lungs burning as the dirt piles higher, her fingers clawing at nothing. She thought she'd escaped their wrath, thought the courtroom was her shield. Now she's suffocating, their laughter a muffled roar above. Her hand breaks free, grasping air, and she digs, her nails splitting, her ribs a shattered cage. She's not done, she tells herself, her rage a lifeline as she punches through, her head bursting out, gasping in the mist. They're gone, the van's taillights fading, believing she's dead. She drags herself out, her body a wreck, her flannel caked with mud and collapses, her breath a sob. She's alive, isn't she? But the stash is gone, Marcus's treachery a blade in her back, and Hayes and Cole think they've won. She crawls to the fence, her arm bleeding fresh, her vision blurring, as she pulls herself up. The outpost looms, a silent witness to her fall, and she stumbles away, the mist her cloak. She thought she'd turned the tide, thought Marcus was her key. Now she's broken, their retaliation a grave she's clawed from, and she wonders if she's got anything left. Her burner's dead, her allies blind, but her pulse beats a stubborn drum. She limps into the night, her resolve a flicker in the dark, vowing to strike back somehow. They've buried her, haven't they? But she's not finished, not yet. Nia Jackson crawls from the shallow grave on Atlanta's outskirts, her lungs burning with dirt and rage, her flannel caked in mud and blood. Her ribs scream from Hayes and Cole's beating, her arms bandage unraveling where a thug's knife grazed her, and her braids hang heavy with soil. Marcus Tate's betrayal, his gun at her temple as he handed her to the cops who buried her alive, fuels a fire she refuses to let die. She staggers to her feet, her vision swimming, the mist cloaking. The abandoned outpost where they left her for dead. Her body's a wreck, her stash of evidence stolen, but she's alive, clawing back from their ruthless strike. She limps through the night, her sneakers squelching, her resolve a jagged edge. She's got to get to Evelyn Ross, got to turn this nightmare into their end. Can she still fight with nothing left? She stumbles through back roads, the city a distant glow, her breath a rasp as she flags a trucker hauling lumber. "Need a ride?" she croaks, her split lips stinging, and he nods, his grizzled face softening at her state. "Downtown?" he asks, and she grunts agreement, collapsing into the cab, her ribs a cage of pain. The truck rumbles, headlights slicing the mist, and Nia clutches her dead burner, her mind racing. She's got no proof now, no files, but the audio's still on the cloud, her last spark. She imagines Hayes and Cole gloating, their cheap suits smug as they think her gone. The trucker drops her near Piedmont Park, her flannel a tattered shroud, and she limps to Evelyn's office, a squat building tucked behind oaks. She bangs on the door, her knuckles bloody, and Evelyn answers, her grey curls wild, her eyes widening. "Nia? Jesus, what happened?" Inside, the office smells of coffee and ink, a haven from the storm. Nia collapses onto a chair, her voice a rasp as she spills it all. Marcus's trap, the beating, the grave. Evelyn's jaw tightens, her hands clenching a mug. "They think you're dead," she says, her tone grim. "We've got one shot." Nia nods, her ribs protesting, and pulls up the cloud server on Evelyn's laptop, her fingers trembling. The audio loads, Hayes' confession crackling through. "Planted that baggie smooth as silk. She's got it, doesn't she?" Evelyn grabs her phone, dialing a contact at a news station. "Live broadcast," she says. "Now!" Nia's heart leaps, her mud-streaked face set. She's turning their burial into her resurrection, isn't she? They race to the precinct, a press conference already underway. Hayes and Cole front and center in crisp uniforms, their suspension lifted, their smirks bold. Reporters swarm, cameras flashing, the crowd buzzing as the cops spin a tale of restored honor. Nia limps from Evelyn's sedan, her flannel a badge of survival, and Evelyn shoves through, her voice a roar. "We've got evidence!" She plugs the USB into a Tex rig, the audio blasting over speakers, Hayes' voice damning, "Disappear like the others." The crowd gasps, cameras swiveling as Cole's scar twitches, Hayes' buzz cut bristling. Nia steps forward, her limp pronounced, her eyes locked on them. "That's me they buried," she says, her voice raw but clear, broadcast live to millions. "I'm alive and they're done." The precinct erupts, reporters shouting, cops scrambling as Hayes lunges, his fist swinging. A uniform tackles. Him. Cole's smirk vanishing as cuffs snap on, their empire crumbling on national TV. Nia's chest swells, her ribs a dull roar, imagining Jamal Carter watching, his freedom sealed. The chief storms out, his face ashen, barking orders as Hayes and Cole are hauled away, their boots dragging. Evelyn grips her arm, her voice low. "You did it, kid." Nia nods, her split lip curving, believing she's won at last. The crowd cheers, a sea of phones recording, and she breathes deep, the mist lifting under the dawn. She's turned their grave into their tomb, hasn't she? She's safe now, the world her witness. They retreat to Evelyn's sedan, the broadcast looping. On every channel, the city ablaze with outrage. Nia sinks into the seat, her body trembling, her flannel stiff with dirt. She imagines Hayes and Cole in cells, their power ash, and lets herself hope. Evelyn drives, her eyes on the road, muttering about federal charges. Nia's mind drifts, replaying the shovel's thud, the dirt's weight, her clawing free. She's done it, she tells herself, flipped their ruthless play into her reckoning. The sedan hums through downtown, the skyline sharp against the sky, and she closes her eyes, her bruises pulsing, but her spirit soaring. She's won, hasn't she? The audio, the broadcast, the arrests, they're her hammer, and she's smashed their wall. But as they turn onto Peachtree, a crack splits the air, a sniper's bullet grazing her shoulder, blood blooming through her flannel. She gasps, slamming against the door, her vision blurring as Evelyn swerves, tires screeching. "Get down!" Evelyn shouts, flooring it, the sedan weaving through traffic. Nia clutches her arm, pain searing, her heart roaring. The shot came from a rooftop, a shadow vanishing as horns blare. Hayes and Cole are cuffed, aren't they? She thought she'd caged them, thought the broadcast was her shield. Now their unseen allies strike, their reach a claw she can't escape. Evelyn pulls into an alley, her voice sharp. "You okay?" Nia nods, her breath shallow, blood dripping onto the seat. "They're not done," she rasps, her hope fraying as the wound burns. Evelyn rips her scarf, tying it around Nia's shoulder, her hands steady despite the panic. "Hospital," she says, peeling out, the sedan rocking as they race through. "Back streets." Nia's mind spins. The bullet a message she can't unread. She imagines their gang ties, Rico's crew, a network deeper than she feared. She thought she'd won, thought their arrests were the end. Now she's bleeding, their retaliation a sniper's kiss, and she wonders how far they'll go. The hospital looms, its lights a beacon, and Evelyn screeches to a stop, hauling her. Inside. Nurses swarm, their voices a blur as Nia's stretchered off, her flannel soaked red. She's alive, isn't she? But the shot's a warning. Their empire's last gasp, and she's not safe yet. They wheel her into surgery, the ceiling spinning as anesthesia floods her veins, her ribs a distant ache. She replays the broadcast, the cuffs, the bullet, her mind clinging to the win. She's buried them, hasn't she? Hayes and Cole are locked up, the world watching, but their allies lurk, their claws sharp. She drifts under, her pulse a stubborn drum, vowing to fight on. Hours later, she wakes in a sterile room, her shoulder bandaged, Evelyn at her side, her grey curls damp with sweat. "They're charged," Evelyn says, her voice firm. "Conspiracy, assault, more. Feds are in." Nia nods, her throat dry, believing it's over. But as she shifts, pain flaring, a shadow moves past her window, gone in a blink. They're out there, aren't they? She stares at the ceiling, the hospital's hum a fragile shield, her body a map of their war. She's turned their burial into her reckoning, hasn't she? The audio, the live crash, the arrests, they're her blade, and she's cut deep. But the bullet's a scar she can't ignore, their reach a ghost she can't kill. Evelyn grips her hand, her eyes fierce. "We'll get them all." Nia nods, her split lip trembling, her resolve a fire rekindled. She's won this round, she tells herself, Hayes and Cole caged at last. But as the shadow lingers in her mind, she wonders if the war's just begun, their allies a storm she's yet to face. Nia Jackson lies in a sterile hospital bed in Atlanta, her shoulder bandaged where a sniper's bullet grazed her, her ribs a throbbing knot from weeks of beatings by detectives Victor Hayes and Randall Cole. Her flannel's gone, replaced by a thin gown, her braids splayed across the pillow, still flecked with mud from the grave she clawed out of. Evelyn Ross sits beside her, her grey curls damp, her eyes fierce with a vow to fight on. The live broadcast crashed Hayes and Cole's press conference, their cuffs a public reckoning, but the bullet's a scar that proves their allies linger, a network deeper than Nia feared. She's alive, her victory raw, but the war's not over. She shifts, pain flaring, and stares at the ceiling, her mind churning. She's got one last play, doesn't she? She's got to reveal the truth, flip their ruthless strike into her final blow. The hospital hums with antiseptic calm, nurses gliding past as morning sun streams through the blinds, warming her bruised face. Evelyn grips her hand, her voice low. "Feds are charging them. Conspiracy, assault, corruption. You buried them, Nia." Her chest swells, a faint smile tugging at her split lip, imagining Hayes's buzz-cut bowed in a cell, Cole's scar twitching behind bars. She nods, her throat dry, believing it's done. But the shadow she saw outside her window gnaws at her, a whisper of danger she can't shake. She saved Jamal Carter, exposed the precinct's rot, turned their burial into her resurrection. Yet, the bullet's a warning, isn't it? She's not safe, not yet. She squeezes Evelyn's hand, her voice a rasp. I need to testify. In court. Full truth. Evelyn's eyes widen, but she nods, her jaw tight. You're sure? Nia's resolve hardens, her pain a fuel. They don't get to hide. Days crawl by, her shoulder healing slow. Her ribs a dull ache as she preps with Evelyn, her law school brain kicking in. She's weak, her arm in a sling, but her mind's a steel trap, replaying every blow, every lie. The feds move fast. Hayes and Cole's trial set. Their charges a laundry list. Evidence tampering, witness intimidation, attempted murder. Nia's the linchpin, her testimony the hammer to seal their fate. She imagines their smirks fading, their power ash, and clings to that. Evelyn brings news. The exposé's widened. Dozens in the 5th Precinct indicted. Rico's gang crumbling under raids. Nia's heart leaps, her fight rippling beyond her dreams. She's won, hasn't she? She's turned their system inside out. But as she shuffles to the bathroom, her reflection shows a stranger. Her eyes hollow, her bruises a map of their war. Is it really over? The trial day dawns, the Fulton County Courthouse swarming with reporters, protesters, a sea of rage and hope. Nia steps from a federal van, her sling swapped for a borrowed blazer. Her braids pulled tight, her limp pronounced but her head high. Marshals flank her, their vests a shield as cameras flash, voices shouting her name. She's a ghost no more, a pariah turned warrior, and the weight of it steadies her. Inside, courtroom 3C is packed, the air thick with tension, the judge's pinched face sterner than ever. Hayes and Cole sit at the defense table, their cheap suits rumpled, their eyes burning with hate. Nia meets their gaze, her split lip a badge, and takes the stand, her voice clear as the clock swears her in. She's ready, isn't she? She's got the truth and it's time to wield it. The U.S. attorney, a tall woman with a sharp jaw, approaches, her tone firm. State your name for the record. Nia leans to the mic, her ribs protesting. Nia Jackson, Assistant U.S. Attorney, Northern District of Georgia. A gasp ripples through the room, heads snapping up, Hayes's fists clenching, Cole's scar stretching in shock. The judge blinks, his glasses slipping as he peers down. Excuse me? Nia's chest swells, her secret a bomb she's detonated at last. I've been undercover, Your Honor, posing as a paralegal intern to investigate systemic corruption in the 5th Precinct. I've got the credentials to prove it. She slides her DOJ ID from her blazer, her golden seal glinting, and hands it up. The gallery explodes, whispers swelling into a roar, cameras clicking as the judge bangs his gavel, his voice sharp. Order! Explain yourself, Ms. Jackson. Nia stands taller, her voice ringing, pain a distant hum. I infiltrated as a nobody, watched Hayes and Cole frame Jamal Carter, beat me, bury me alive. I've got audio, files, witnesses, proving they ran a network of payoffs, gang ties, and terror in Atlanta's black communities. She nods to Evelyn, who plays the diner audio. Hayes's confession blasting, planted that baggie smooth as silk. She stacks the precinct files, her hands steady despite the sling's absence, detailing every falsified report, every silenced voice. They kidnapped Jamal, torched a warehouse to frame me, shot at me from a rooftop. I'm the proof they couldn't. Kill. The prosecutor leaps, his voice shrill. Objection, she's a fraud. But the U.S. attorney fires back, her tone ice. Her ID's verified, Your Honor, she's DOJ. The judge's face pales, his gavel still as he nods. Continue. She lays it bare, her weeks of hell a litany of their crimes. The diner threat. The ambush, Marcus Tate's betrayal, the grave. She points at Hayes and Cole, her eyes steel. They mocked me, thought I was nothing. Now they're exposed. The jury leans in, a juror's jaw dropping as she plays the warehouse audio, their threats crackling. You're done! Hayes lunges, his chair scraping, but marshals pin him, his roar muffled. Cole's smirk's gone, his scar a twitch of fear. Nia's heart pounds, her shoulder throbbing, imagining Jamal watching, his freedom sealed. She's flipped their game, hasn't she? She's turned their ruthlessness into her reckoning. The U.S. attorney piles on, indicting dozens more, a federal sting Nia sparked, and the courtroom quakes, their empire ash under her words. The defense flails, their lawyer a sweating mess, his objections drowned by evidence. Timestamps, forensics, witnesses from the shadows. The judge's voice cuts through, cold and final. Hayes and Cole, guilty on all counts, sentenced to life, no parole. The gallery cheers, a juror nodding, and Nia breathes deep, her ribs a dull roar, believing it's over. They're cuffed. Hayes's buzz-cut bowed, Cole's scar hidden as they're dragged out, their boots scraping. She steps down, her limp, heavy Evelyn at her side, her grey curls a halo. You're a legend, Evelyn says, her voice thick. Nia nods, her split lip trembling, thinking she's safe at last. She's won, hasn't she? She's turned there, wore into her justice, the world her witness. She exits the stand, marshals clearing a path as reporters swarm, their questions a blur. She limps to the courthouse steps, the sun blinding, protesters roaring her name, their signs a forest of triumph. She imagines Hayes and Cole in cells, their power dust Jamal free, the precinct gutted. She's done it, she tells herself, flipped their burial into her rise. Evelyn guides her to the van, her voice low. Fed's a cleaning house. You're clear. Nia nods, her shoulder a dull ache, believing the nightmare's end. She climbs in, the door shutting, her body sinking into the seat, her flannel's memory a ghost. She's safe now, isn't she? The van rolls, the city blurring past, and she closes her eyes, her bruises fading in her mind, justice a balm she's earned. But as they turn onto a quiet street, a blast shatters the calm, the van rocking as a bomb explodes beneath it, flames licking the chassis. Nia's thrown, her shoulder slamming the wall, her vision blackening as glass rains. She gasps, her ribs cracking anew, blood hot on her face as the van skids, metal screaming. Evelyn's shout cuts through, her grey curls blood-streaked as she crawls to Nia, her voice raw. Stay with me! Nia's ears ring, her body a wreck, the world tilting as smoke chokes her lungs. She thought she'd won, thought their convictions were her shield. Now their allies strike. A final claw from the grave, and she's bleeding again. They reach a bomb she didn't see. Marshals swarm, pulling her from the wreckage, her gown torn, her shoulder pulsing red. She's alive, isn't she? They drag. Her to safety. The street a chaos of sirens and shouts, the van a twisted husk. Evelyn's beside her, her arm gashed, her eyes fierce. Gang hit! A marshal snaps, his radio crackling. Rico's crew! Nia's stomach sinks, her breath shallow as paramedics swarm, their hands a blur on her wounds. She imagines Hayes and Cole smirking from cells, their network a hydra, she's only wounded. She thought she'd ended it, thought the trial was her hammer. Now she's scarred, their retaliation a blast she's survived by inches. They stretch her away, her vision fading, but her resolve flares, a fire in the dark. She's not done, she tells herself, her pulse a stubborn drum. She'll dismantle them all, won't she? The hospital looms again, its lights a lifeline as they wheel her in. Her body a map of their war, her shoulder a fresh wound atop the old. Evelyn limps beside her, her voice a vow. We'll hunt them down. Nia nods, her throat raw, blood streaking her face as anesthesia floods her veins. She's flipped their game, hasn't she? She's revealed her truth, caged Hayes and Cole, sparked a reckoning. But the bomb's a twist, a new war dawning, their allies a storm she's yet to face. She drifts under, her mind clinging to the fight, vowing to rise again, scarred but unbroken, her justice a flame they can't douse. Nia Jackson's journey. In racist cops mock black girl in court. Shocked to learn she's a U.S. genius attorney in disguise. Offers profound lessons about resilience, justice, and the cost of confronting systemic corruption. First, it underscores the power of perseverance. Nia faced relentless attacks, beatings, betrayal, and burial, yet clawed back each time, proving that grit can defy even the darkest odds. Her story teaches us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the will to fight through it. Second, It exposes the deep roots of racial injustice. Hayes and Cole's racist actions weren't isolated. They thrived in a network that shielded them, showing how systemic bias festers unchecked until challenged. Nia's undercover brilliance reveals that truth, wielded wisely, can topple empires, but it comes with scars. Third, it warns of the price of victory. The bomb that nearly killed her after the trial highlights that defeating one layer of corruption often unveils another, a sobering reminder that justice is a marathon, not a sprint. Finally, it celebrates the unsung. Nia, mocked as a little shadow, turned her invisibility into strength, proving that those dismissed by society can reshape it. Her tale urges us to question who we overlook and what battles we ignore. So what's your takeaway? How far would you go to expose a racist system like Nia did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if her fight inspires you, and subscribe for more stories of unbreakable spirits. Share this with someone who needs to see justice in action. Thank you for joining Nia's war against corruption. Here's to a world where truth prevails and every voice rises strong.